Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CDE SACS Forum. My name is Julie Hong, and I'm with the Financial Accountability Information Services and the Fiscal Oversight teams. Our team are excited to share with you some updates on the SACS Forum today. And let's start with some housekeeping items. First and foremost, be sure to have your microphone muted. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function located at the bottom right of your screen.
No, repeat.
You may also send questions to the SACS info at sacsinfo@cde.ca.gov. And anytime after the meeting, if you have questions, feel free to send us a message. And this meeting is also being recorded. So we will have a recap of the meetings at the web page below and at the same website. For those who are interested in getting email notifications of future meetings and meeting minutes as they are posted on the website, please go into the website and sign up for the SACS Forum mailing list. And here on to some announcements and information. Our LEA local indirect cost rate has been posted. The 23-24 approved was posted and published and found at the CDE indirect cost rate website. The Every Student Succeed Act per pupil expenditure, the collection for the period 21-22 fiscal year has ended. CDE is currently reviewing the data and notify LEAs of any issues that we have found. In June, CDE anticipates to post the data for the 21-22 fiscal year for the ESTA per pupil expenditure reporting at our webpage. On to the budget release. The 23-24 budget reporting period release has been released in May 1st. And now to some accounting updates. Blanche Katayama will be presenting.
Oops. There we go. Good morning, everyone. So just want to provide a quick update on the discussion topic we had from our last forum, which was in February, and the update on whether Fund 12 will be open to the special education goals, 5,000, beginning in fiscal year 23-24. We actually will still need further discussion with the special education division. We did receive some feedback. There are only a few, so we actually would like more of the LEA feedback on whether if you do want or you don't want special education goal codes open to Fund 12. And some that are wanting it did indicate that it would be better track for special education expenditures. However, some of the concerns that LEAs do have is that opening Fund 12 would cause issues in calculating the MOE. So we do, because of that, we want to discuss further with the special education division before we make that decision. And if we do opening it to Fund 12, it would be effective fiscal year 2023-24. You can also refer to the Early Education Management Bulletin 2302 for more information. We would really appreciate your thoughts on this. Please send us your feedback to sacsinfo@cde.ca.gov. Now I'm going to pass it over to John if there are no further questions.
Blanche, there's actually a question about the RRMA calculation and resource codes, and since that's your area, but I'm not sure if we are addressing that later in the SACS updates.
We received a question from a district we support. Any word on whether or not some of the newer bucket of money, learning recovery and arts and music instruction block grant, would be excluded from the RRMA? I'm not aware of any current statute that would exclude these new funding. If there are, we will provide an update on to the LEAs if these would be excluded, but currently I'm not aware of that. But I'll definitely look into it to see if there are any proposed language on it. Okay, and I don't see any other questions. And I'll pass it back to John.
Great. Thank you, Blanche. So back in November, I believe we provided an update on the school level finance survey. This is a new requirement that would come from the U.S. Department of Education, where we need to report total current expenditures for each public school within the state. So this collection somewhat mirrors what we already do with the ESSA per pupil application. However, there's just going to be a few more items that would need to be included. However, we had a meeting last week with the U.S. Department of Ed, and the requirement is still being reviewed, and it's still with the Office of Management and Budget. So really, there's not much of an update other than they're still looking at it. However, we do believe that we're going to probably hear something soon, one way or the other. But if we can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So, but just a reminder as far as what this requirement would look like, the additional items that we would need to provide amounts for would be more at the function level. So we would need to identify these amounts at a school level, instruction, your student support services, instructional staff support, and also school administration. And then we go to the next slide. We also have to break out a little bit more. They call them exhibits. We would need to see what the teacher salaries are within the instruction function, and then instructional aid salaries also within the instruction function, and then books and periodical within the instruction and instructional staff support functions. So right now, that's the only update we have. Our plan, though, is once, if this does get approved, what we would most likely do is modify the ESSA PPE application to allow for these items to be collected. And then we would then, once we get the information, we would then pass that on to the U.S. Department of Ed for them to do their analysis of what they're looking at. But I don't see where can we get I do see a question here, where can we obtain the definition of those 4 staff categories? We will provide more information regarding these, but you know, the 4 categories they have is from the NCES accounting handbook, and our CSAM mirrors that pretty well. But we will definitely take a look at that and see if there's a a crosswalk that we may need to do with that. So we are working on that, and we will provide that information as well. And I think that's what I have. We do have a question asking about the resource code for Prop 28, but I am going to hand this off to Jody, and she will address that question.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So not much to report on the resource code updates. Let's see, I can't see that I'm on. So can everyone hear me okay? Okay, so not much to report on the resource code updates. We did have a validation table update on May 1st, and that coincided with the release of the SACS Web System 23-24 budget. And of course, all of the code combinations that were included in that update were included in that budget release. So there was one new resource code in that update. It was 6102 for Child Development Universal Pre-K Mixed Delivery Planning Grant. And we we ended some programs. We ended 6011 for the After School Kids Code Grant Pilot Program. That program will be no longer valid after June 30th, 2025. The Emergency Repair Program, Resource 6225, that program will no longer be valid after June 30th, 2024. So we know that there are more programs out there that need that are no longer funded and that need updating in the SACS query. We just haven't had a lot of time to get in the SACS query and clean all that up, since the main focus has been the SACS web system. But one of the programs that we do know is going to be ending that we wanted to bring to your attention today is Resource 6512 for the special education mental health services. This program was last funded in 2019-20, and normally we give LEAs 3 years to spend down the funds. But the special education work group actually reached out to us and to see if this resource was ending. And after some discussion, it was decided to give LEAs some extra time to spend down these funds, especially during COVID. It was difficult to get some expenditures in there. So this resource we're giving LEAs until June 30th, 2025. So that'll be the last available last available date. And that should give everyone plenty of time to spend down those funds. So just a reminder that we are still posting all the validation tables to our webpage for those LEAs who wish to use them in their local accounting systems. But again, I think I mentioned before with SACS Web, there's no longer the need to update the software, and it's all done behind the scenes, but we will still provide those for you. And now to the hot topic, Prop 28, Arts and Music Education Funding. So we do get a lot of requests for a resource code and a lot of questions regarding this program, but at this time we do not have a resource code for this funding. The first allocation and apportionment of the AMS funding isn't scheduled to go out until later in fiscal year 23-24. And at this time, we just don't have enough information to set up the code and to set up the correct accounting guidance. And so we really just caution LEAs about including this in their budgets until more is known, especially with all the uncertainty in the state budget. And I think once the budget is signed, we'll have more information. So we will definitely release that code as soon as we have enough information, and probably not for budget reporting period, but hopefully for the interim reporting period. So stay tuned for the Prop 28 resource code. So does anyone have any questions? That's about all I have.
Jody, we have a few people that have raised their hands.
Oh, sure.
So maybe we can, Michelle, if you would like to ask your question, please go ahead. Cindy, if you would like to ask your question, please go ahead. So nothing's coming through. So if you do have questions, you can type them into the Q&A, and that'll be fine. Okay. Thank you, Jody.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to hand it off to Agnes for some GASB 96. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. This is Agnes, and today we are going to talking about the GASB 96. And actually, we have been talking about that, at least 2 or 3 times already during our SACS Forum. But today is mainly is really just a reminder. Everybody's saying that this GASB 96 subscription-based information technology arrangements, because speeders, just a reminder. This one is really effective 2022-23 means this fiscal year. And we did receive some questions asking about, is it possible for delay for the implementation. But I just want to make sure everybody aware that this statement actually is really issued by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, the GASB. And we all know that the GASB is really the authoritative standard setting body for the state and the local government. They are also the one really develops all this generally accepted accounting principle gap for state and local governments, and they are the one set the statements, and actually it's not really by CDE. So at this point in time, we don't really see any delay for the implementation. So just want to bring up the attention to everybody. Yes, this is really it needs to be implemented for this fiscal year. Next slide, please. And we want also same time we want to bring up some items for your consideration during your implementation. And first thing is we understand, a lot of most of subscription contracts, they really do not have explicitly include interest rates in the contract. For that sense means, your LEA needs to be used. You should use that we call the estimated incremental borrowing rate to do your liability calculation. And then somebody will ask, what is really the estimated incremental borrowing rate, they should use. So you have to really look back to your own organization. If you're to go out to purchase a similar asset, and also time, with a similar term, how much you have to pay for that rate. That should be your estimated incremental borrowing rate you should use. And we all understand that, the GASB 87 leases already implemented last year. But, we want, to bring it to your attention that, even though you may already establish, some rates for the GASB 87 last year, and you may thinking about, okay, maybe we can jump ahead to use the same rate. But also same time, we understand that the interest rates has been really changed dramatically compared to last year. So I just want to bring attention, the rates you used in the last year may be a lot lower than today's environment. And we all understand that if you're using a lower rate, means, you will lead to a higher subscription liability when you're doing your calculation. So that's why I want to bring it to attention. And also the other thing is really for the subscription term, also at the same time, when you're doing your calculation, the term of the contract is really important too. So it means, you have to, when you decided for the term, you have to really document how your decision was concluded. I think we should go back to the previous slides. Thank you. And also at the same time, we understand that, during the GASB 87 lease, implementation last year, some LEA thinking about to use the capitalization threshold for the assets, to determine maybe they don't really need to book the assets and the liability on the financial statement. But at the same time, we want to bring it to your attention, say that, yes, maybe you can think about to use the capitalization threshold, but that is really, for this particular statement, just like the GASB 87. The asset is on one side, but that is another side, is really the liability side. So you really need to think about for the quantitative and qualitative significance on the subscription on the liability. If they're really missing from your financial statement, what would be the implication? So before you start doing that, please discuss with your auditors. Another thing, to consider is a lot of time, one contract, maybe they have multiple components. For example, like maybe one contract, they will have a subscription component, means the right to use the assets, the IT assets. But on the other hand, maybe also included a non-subscription component like the maintenance service. For that sense, you really need to separate them out, because for the GASB 96, the maintenance service part is not really within the scope. So that, you need to separate them out as much as possible, as practical as possible. And definitely means, you have to really use the professional judgment, and also at the same time, maybe really need to work with your IT staff to make the determination. And the other, common thing, for the contract is maybe the one contract, they have multiple IT assets components at the same time, if the component, they really significant, different from each other, you may also need to separate them out, or maybe just in the book as one. But again, work with the IT staff and also use a professional judgment to thinking about that. Next. And the other thing, for consideration is, we also received some questions, asking, hey, how about if we're really making all the payment upfront, we are not really making any annual payment, during the contract, then is it really, means, you know, we are not subject to the GASB 96. Yes, it's kind of part of the story, because yes, if you really make all your payments upfront, then means you really don't have any more annual payments you have to make in the subsequent years. That means you really don't really have a subscription liability. But on the other hand, you still have to recognize your subscription assets in your governmental-wide financial statement and also do the amortization. Lastly is for the subscription liability, look at the contract. If anything changed, you know, for one of the following changes, like change in the term, or maybe change, you know, to the subscription payment, maybe something changed, or maybe really dramatic change in the interest rate, or maybe some variable payment somehow now become fixed, then, you know, with one of those, you know, happening, you really need to remeasure your subscription liability. Next, thank you. One thing, you know, will be happen is, because now with this, you know, GASB 96, you may see a little bit surprised. You will have some increase in your debt services expenditure, like the object 7439, the debt service principal, and the debt service interest 7438 in the governmental fund. And also, at the same time, you may see some decrease in the other expenditure in the governmental fund, like your, for example, like if you using an online subscription, you know, for the online textbook, because in the past, before, you know, this GASB 96, you will book everything to object 4100 as expenditures. But now, because of the GASB 96, instead, you know, recording everything to the object 4100, now actually you really have to book the assets, but also at the same time, any subscription payment, the annual payments in the subsequent year, instead of using, you know, the object 4100, you will make the payment actually using 7439 and 7438. That's why I'm saying, you know, one of the implications on your governmental fund, you will see increase in the debt service expenditures, but at the same time, you see the decrease in other expenditures. For example, like object 4100. Next. So another implication on your financial statement is definitely because of the GASB 96, you need to provide more additional disclosures on your governmental-wide financial statement. First, like your general, really general, you know, description about your speeder, what is really that subscription asset, and your subscription liability. And that subscription liability, you have to include something like a table, your principal interest requirement to maturity, and you have to do in it for each subsequent 5 years. And that's all I have, you know, for the 96 reminder. And do we have any questions?
There is a few questions in there. Agnes, can you see them, or do you want me to read them?
I see them.
Okay, thank you.
And Gigi asks, in the latest SACS update, you know, the option to consider Okay, in Gigi, you know, question, you know, she say, you know, in this latest SACS update, you note the option to consider a capitalization threshold for subscriptions. In my original research, it was my understanding that the capitalization was determined in aggregate, not at a singular subscription basis. Is there now guidance saying that we can have a significant determination on a singular basis? This significantly changes our implementation and year-end, you know, entries. And actually, if you really go back to my slides, that's why I'm saying, you know, I never say it's really in a singular, you know, subscription basis. We understand some LEA try to use the capitalization threshold to maybe thinking about they're not really subject to GASB 96. But I just want to point out, actually, Gigi, you're really in the right reasoning, because that's what we want to hear is yes, you should really determine in the aggregate level, not in the single level. And appreciate it, Gigi, your guidelines. Yes, that's what I don't mean that we encourage you to do the single thing. No, that's not what I mean. I'm just pointed out some consideration. If your LA to do using the capitalization threshold, please be aware you need to look at the aggregate level, not at the singular level. Thank you. And then next, Gigi also asked, can we give some example or guidance on the conversion entries you would complete for a subscription that was 100% pay upfront? Yes, because if you will pay 100% upfront, that means you will only have because we do have a new object code 6700 for the subscription assets. So means to me you would debit this object 6700 as the subscription assets, and they credit the cash because you really pay upfront. Then for the conversion entry, all you really need to do is really convert that object 6700 to our new object code 9470 subscription assets, become a subscription assets on your government-wide financial statement. I guess I already answered Gigi's question. If you have further questions, just go ahead to send us the questions. The next one is Roseanne. To confirm, virtual textbook apply to GASB 96? It really depends, because as far as we understand, if you really, the service is really, it's like the online curriculum, your assets, you means, your teacher, your students, really have some kind of agreement, to let them to access, textbook online. Yes or no? But again, I would say, please go back to look at the GASB 96, paragraph to see, really the determination. But as far as we understand, at this point of time, most of them may fall under GASB 96.
Agnes, we have a few people with their hands up, and
yes.
I'll ask them to unmute, and we'll start with Janice, please. We can ask Araceli. I apologize if I am not doing that correctly.
Oh, John, Craig said that there's no option to unmute.
Oh, well, it should work.
Yeah, Tina also say they can unmute. Means they cannot talk.
Okay. Okay, well, we will need to figure that out. But in the meantime, if you want to type in your questions through the Q&A, we can try to answer those.
Yes, and also at the same time, if you have more questions, maybe you need to provide us more detail, please, feel free to send it to saxinfo@cde.ca.gov. And also at the same time, definitely, we need, if you need, because I have been, talking to some LDA too. So feel free to reach out to us. We can reach to you in person. Maybe we can, using Teams, something we can, talk more in details about your own situation. Okay, and I do see one question coming from Maggie. And her question says, sometimes textbook orders come with an online subscription, but the invoice does not separate the cost. How will we handle these situations? Hey, thank you, Maggie. If it's really the case, again, maybe really using your own professional judgment to see really the cost, because at the same time, when you say the invoice does not separate the cost, I'm not sure what kind of cost really involved in invoice. Maybe some is really subject to the GASB 96, some of them are not. But without too much detail, I really don't have much to can provide. Sorry about that. But again, I think if you really have any particular more question about your invoice, maybe you can go back to your vendor to ask them, or maybe, get with your own IT staff. Okay. And then there's another question coming from Cecilia, and she's talking about what function should be used instead of 1,000 for expenditure above the threshold. Well, Cecilia, with this GASB 96, this is really no change for the other, our SACS code structure. It really depends on how this software will be used for what function. So it does not change. It's really mainly change is really the way with the object code instead of the goal and function. There's really no change, in the goal and function. And Gigi say, Agnes, were you able to provide your email? Like what I say, everybody can send the questions to sacsinfo@cde.ca.gov. That's how we communicate back to all the LEAs. Thank you, Gigi. If there's no more further questions, I'm going to pass to our next topic about the SACS web system updates. And this will be Veronica. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you, Agnes. Good morning. First, let's talk about our wonderful releases that we've had since the last meeting. So back on April 24th, we released the end of year projection reporting period. And then a week later, we released the 23-24 budget reporting period on May 1st, hard at work. And we continue to be hard at work because we're working on the 22-23 and audited actuals reporting period. And we're hoping that will be out late June, early July. Next slide, thanks. So we have some reminders from the last meeting. Let's see, for just that for 22-23 UA, that all the reporting is going to be via the new SACS web system. That means that SACS and charter all forms will be reported in the new system, and that so all charter schools are going to be reporting their UA submissions in SACS web, whether it's SACS filing separately or with their authorizing agencies, or the alt form. Because our legacy formats aren't used any longer, but just remember everything's going to be filed via the SACS web system. And another reminder that probably going to be having quite a few new charter school users. They're going to be new to the system, so that authorizing agencies should be starting, or if they haven't already started, should be starting setting up those new user accounts in the appropriate roles for our new charter school users, as well as getting them trained up on system access and basic system navigation. The last meeting, a question came up of whether or not CDE was going to provide UA training. And we are in the process of coming up with some kind of training for UAs. We don't have details on that, but we are going to provide something. We're coming up with some kind of program. Would like to note that the training is likely to be after the UA period is released, and that it's going to focus on forms and processes that are unique to the UA period that you haven't seen yet. And it may not be all the forms, but it's things like the alt form. The alt form, it has the old format. It's going to be in the new format and the new system. So we want to make sure people know how to access it. They're going to have some technical review checks and some internal form checks. We just want to make sure that people know how to do what they need to do with the UA period as well. Let's see here. These are for the proposed changes, high level just pulling out some proposed changes that we're making for the UA period. For special ed maintenance of effort reports, SCMA, SCMB, SCMAI, we're modifying the reports to exclude the new objects 6700 and 6920, that's subscription assets, and amortization expense subscription assets. So to exclude them as capital outlay. And then for the contribution from unrestricted to federal, that's going to be programmed to be 0 if the extracted amount is negative. Some other significant changes. This kind of piggybacks on what Agnes was just speaking to about GASB 96. We had some big changes to the government-wide reports, maybe not big changes, but lots of changes. And we're modifying 5 existing conversion entries, and we're adding 1 new conversion entry, 28, lease subscription modification termination. And that's a new entry to record adjustments due to lease subscription modification or at the end of lease subscription term. And then, of course, modify everything else in these statements accordingly due to GASB 96. Next slide. Okay, so we have known problems and fixes in our system. We're bringing some of these to your attention because they don't have workarounds, they are significant, and fixes are in progress. And because the fixes aren't out yet, we especially want to make sure that everyone knows about them. First one is for end of year projection reporting period. It's Form MYP-I. It's for county, district, and JPAs in Section E, available reserves. There are 3 lines that aren't pulling in the correct Fund 17 data for Object 9750, 9789, and 9790. So again, not fixed yet, but we're working on them. Next. Oh, there we go. The other ones that we want to bring to your attention are for 23-24 budget. It's they're for criterion standards. This first one is for county office, criterion 2, LCFF revenue. So 2C isn't extracting the correct LCFF revenue for prior year and budget year. But again, fixes in progress, and there is no workaround, but we hope to get that fix out soon. And the other criterion standards issue that we wanted to bring up is for criterion 4 or 6, other revenues and expenditures. This one only affects county offices and JPAs, but it doesn't affect districts. And they're kind of, they're related. It's in Section 4B or 6B, the extracted amounts for total federal revenues, total other state revenues, and total local revenues. Those are not correct. So, and then down further in the expenditures section, the first prior year and budget year, the extracted amounts for books and supplies and services and other operating expenditures are incorrect as well. So again, we don't have workarounds for these. We're working on a fix. We're hoping to have them fixed within the week or by the end of the week. We're doing our best to get them out as soon as we can. Our developers are working on them now. And I don't know if everyone is aware, but if you go into the SACS system, the SACS web system, and you at the first page that you land on after you log in, there's at the dashboard in the upper left hand corner, there's like a little section that's called problems and fixes. And so all of these plus more are listed there, but because they're kind of bigger issues, we wanted to make sure we brought it up here. And it looks like we might have questions. So I guess I see some up here from Jenny Goodspeed to confirm if we instructed charters to report the alt form for original budget or interims, would it be available for these? If we instructed, so yeah, charters. No, the alt form will not be available for budget or interims at this time. The alt form will be available only for the the UA period, 22-23 UA period. Next question for Janelle De Leon. What access should we grant charter school users that will be using the alternative form? I think Hillary's going to speak to that next, so I'll let her answer that one. Ning, how to get the training for SACS web system for unaudited actuals? Could you please email the training link information for us? So that we have no details on the UA training yet. Once we do have the details, we'll definitely share that information, and because we do want people trained up on how to use that functionality that's unique to UA, but we don't have the details yet. But what I can say, it's probably going to be after the UA period is released. That said, it's probably not going to focus on how to sign people in, how to add users, basic system navigation, that kind of stuff. So that can at least get started in the meantime. Lori, for the 22-23 estimated actuals adopted budget, which reporting period should be? So for the 23-24 budget, for the July 1 budget, you want to make sure that in the upper right-hand corner of when you go into SACS Web, in the upper right-hand corner under your login information, there is there's a context fiscal year, and you right off the bat, you want to make sure that that says 23-24. Once you go in there, then the system's going to be filtered to only look at 23-24 reporting periods. So then you should be able to access the budget reporting period from there. We do know that, for example, I think it's in, is it the technical review checks and possibly the user data input review screen printouts? I think they were printing the wrong fiscal year for either budget or actuals. I don't remember which it was, but it is cosmetic in that it's pulling the right data. It just has the wrong label at the top of the printouts. And we are working on getting that fixed if it hasn't been fixed already. And let me know if that doesn't answer your question, please. But as long as you're in the upper right-hand corner of the SACS Web and your context fiscal year underneath your login information in the upper right-hand corner says 23-24, then that's the year that you're accessing. Will the known problems be resolved for 23-24 budget? Yes, they are getting for the problems that we have here in these slides. Yes, they will be fixed. They are getting fixed now. It's just that we have to make sure that as soon as they're fixed, that we get them tested and get them pushed out for you guys, hopefully by the end of the week, hopefully. Training is going to be available after UA is due or before. Training is going to be available for UA after the UA period, reporting period is released. So the training will definitely be available before UA period is, UA submissions are due. And Veronica, I see that you put the FECMAT system, SACS system training videos available for the link in the chat as well. Thank you for providing that. That is going to be helpful for people who especially need to get people trained up on charter school stuff, charter school users. Ning, can charter schools use the alt form to fill out the financial information and import into the SACS system and then, okay, hang on. Can charter schools use the alt form to fill out the financial information and import to the SACS system and then submit the report in the SACS system? So I'm gonna make a few assumptions here. I'm assuming that you're not talking about the legacy alt form at all in the old Excel format. That is no longer going to be used and will not be importable into the new SACS web system. In the new SACS web system, you will go into the forms and fill them out for the alt form. And then once that's a little more simple than it really would be. But once you're good with it, or once you're finished typing everything in within the SACS form and within the SACS web system, it will be exportable. And then at that point, you'll be able to import that back in, but it starts with SACS web. It has to be, the form has to be key entered, the alt form in SACS web. And then at that point, it can be exported and imported within SACS web, but there's nothing in the old legacy format that will talk to the new SACS web. Hopefully that answered your question. If it didn't, let me know. Well, I guess that's the end of the questions. Totally appreciate your patience, everyone, for these fixes that we're working on. And again, hope to have them by the end of the week, doing our best to get them out as soon as we can. If you have questions, you know to send them to our, I should know what our SACS web email address. I'm assuming it's sacsweb@cde.ca.gov. And since there aren't any questions, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Hillary, who's going to talk about the charter alt form. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time going a little bit more in depth about the charter alt form. Some of the stuff that I will be presenting in my slides has been answered already in the Q&A section. So hopefully this will go pretty fast. And as always, I am open to answering additional questions about the alternative form. So the alternative form will be available in SACS Web for UA reporting in June or the beginning of July. That's currently the target date that we have. And at this time, there are no plans to develop alt forms for budget or interim reporting because statutorily, the CDE is only required to provide a format for UA reporting. So the charters that wish to use CDE to develop resources for other reporting periods are encouraged to consider reporting using the SACS coding structure and the traditional SACS forms. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the roles for the charters in SACS Web will be similar to those that are assigned to other LEAs, and the charter authorizers will be responsible for adding charter users in SACS Web. At this time, as Veronica mentioned earlier, there aren't plans for charters to be able to upload completed alt forms in the old Excel format into SACS Web. All the data must be hand-keyed into the new SACS Web-based alternative form. And after that, they will be able to import and export it as they see fit. If a charter wants to get ahead of things, the old alternative form is still available on our website, and they can use that to practice entering in the data that will ultimately be entered again into SACS Web. The CDE will be providing additional resources regarding the alt form as we move closer to the release date. This will include things along the lines of a frequently asked questions section of our website to address many of the most pressing issues that our charters are facing as they work in the new alternative form. Are there any questions regarding this section? Okay, Julie. Go ahead.
Thank you, Hillary. With that, is there any other questions for the team? Anybody else has last minute questions? No? But thank you so much, everybody, for attending. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for all the questions. I think it's really helpful that we conduct an interactive meeting, and hopefully you find some information that's helpful today. So with that, just a note, for next meeting, we will be scheduled for November 7th, election day. So we hope to see you back again and hope you will be able to join us as we share some additional information. So that's all we have, unless there's any last minute questions.
I do see one question that popped up that looks like it's for me. And will the alt form check prior year ending and beginning balances? Yes, the plan is for the alt form to check those as we move forward.
Yeah, I can answer that one. they're asking if that they missed the response for the Prop 28 resource code. So no, we do not have a code yet. We are still waiting for more information and for the budget to come in signed. And there's just not enough information out there yet. So no code yet, but we will let you know when we have one. Thank you.
There's a questions, will the recording of this meeting be available soon? Jody, do you know the time that it takes for it to be uploaded to the web?
Yeah, maybe. I'd like to say a week, but maybe a week or two. Just depends on how fast the turnaround time is and how quick we can get the transcription done. But we will send out an email to the listserv when it is available.
Thank you.
And there's another alt forum question, Hillary.
Yes, I see that. What the question is, what options do we have for alt forms at interims in the new year? Or do charters need to use the SACS structure to report at interims? As in prior years, we do not provide an alternative form for interim reporting. Charters are welcome to use a format that's prescribed by their authorizing agency. Or they can use the SACS structure if they so choose. We do intend to offer, oh, I'm sorry. We have a question where they're saying, I may have missed it. Will some sort of training be available for charter authorizers anytime soon? After the release of the alternative form, we will be offering some sort of training related to the alternative form. Stay tuned. That will be offered in late June, early July, depending upon when the alternative form is released.
Thank you, Hillary. Looks like that's all the questions we have. Is anybody else? If not, thank you for coming and thank you for spending your time with us and asking all the great questions. Have a great day.